Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you. Okay, I'm excited to be here, so thank you so much. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, David. In order to share with you my vision for the future of philanthropy, I need to first ground you in a little bit about my past. Philanthropy is nothing if not obsessed with lineage. The past impacts how we analyze the present and how we imagine the future. So, a little bit about me. I'll start with my father, Dr. Robert Hayling, born and raised in the panhandle of southern city of Tallahassee, Florida, where he loved dogs and worked for families that bred horses. He attended Florida A&M University. Then the Air Force offered him further education, travel, and the promise of meritocracy. After dental school, my dad moved the family to St. Augustine, Florida, where he opened his practice. Like so many black men who came out of the military, he was shocked and angered by the discrimination and degradation he experienced. So he became an activist. As chapter leader of the NAACP, SCLC, and SNCC, he organized sit-ins. He organized one of the first and most famous swim-ins to desegregate pools and beaches, and he and other black citizens were chased, beaten, assaulted, and arrested. My father was abducted by the KKK, beaten with a baseball bat within an inch of his life, and then doused in gasoline. Before they could strike the match, he was arrested and charged with assaulting his attackers. My mom, Athea Hayling, seen here down in the lower right-hand corner, left corner, 5'2" to my dad's 6'2", was formidable in her own right. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, she wanted to be a scientist. But because of, racism and sexism, she became a science teacher instead. My mom marched in support of civil rights, taught school, though she did have to quit her job each time she became pregnant, as was required at the time, and built a home in this new community for our family. When the Klan, angered by my father's work with MLK, Ralph Abernathy, and Andrew Young, shot up our house, thankfully, my mother, 5 months pregnant with me, and my 2 older sisters were asleep in the back of the house. They were not hurt, but our family dog, who had run to the front of the house to sound the alarm, was shot and killed. My sisters still talk about watching him slowly bleed to death. Throughout her career, my mom was a devoted member of the Teachers Union, where she fought for living wages for teachers and for funding for her students. Florida, is a state with no income tax and a deplorable track record of catering to tourists and retirees over children's education and welfare. Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So I grew up in a household where no one said, "This country has got to change." I grew up in a household where I was taught, "We have to change this country." I entered this field more than 30 years ago with a passion to create change, not to just smooth rough edges, but to revamp the whole system to produce equitable outcomes. Not to create a kinder and gentler poverty, but to eliminate poverty. Not to provide scholarships to a select few, but to create opportunity for everyone. In other words, I saw philanthropy as a place of radical possibility. And it is the history that I draw upon, that I've just shared with you, that I drew upon when Stanford Social Innovation Review asked me to write about my vision for the future of philanthropy. What follows are fundamental shifts that I believe we need to make if we are to turbocharge this field and achieve the promise of a multiracial democracy where no one is left behind. So many of the practices of philanthropy mirror and reinforce the oppressive systems we are trying to dismantle. These shifts in perspective and practice can unlock new possibilities. So here we go. We need to move from extraction to regeneration. We cannot continue to take and take and take. Society's obsession with economic-only metrics, such as GDP, reinforces the myth that eternal growth is possible or even desirable. The soil, by contrast, teaches us the natural cycle of life and death and regeneration, reaping and sowing, and never taking more than can be replenished. We live on a planet that teaches us the laws of seasons and regrowth. Abundance is possible, but only if we limit our greed and invest in that which renews. Communities in the infamous Cancer Alley in Louisiana are fighting back against the fossil fuel companies that have destroyed the natural beauty of their communities, destroyed the fishing, foraging, and farming that form the basis of their cultural connections. And these companies continue to push the false choice of jobs or clean air. Shouldn't philanthropy be in the business of providing David a megaphone and at least a slingshot in the fight against Goliath? We need to move from the perspective of individualistic attention to interconnectedness. We must shift from seeing everything as individualistic to understanding that we are all connected. Wealth accumulation and having a great deal of money, and let's be honest too, for those of us who work in philanthropy, having a great deal of privilege can be incredibly isolating. And perhaps that is why so many wealthy donors hold tight to the illusion of self-sufficiency. This silly notion that any one person can do it all, the idea that interdependence is a weakness instead of a strength. Ironically, the way that traditional philanthropy is practiced further distances wealthy donors from the communities they seek to serve through their philanthropy. Millions of dollars are dispersed based solely on donor intent, and bizarrely, which is a bizarrely individualistic approach to what we claim is a humanitarian endeavor. Trust-based philanthropy, practiced thoughtfully over time, helps donors lock arms with communities working towards shared goals of equity and fairness. Organized philanthropy grew from financial services, program officers morphed from loan officers, and the habits of requiring proof, plans, and assurance of risk-free outcomes linger. But new models of philanthropy, such as the Democracy Frontlines Fund, offer a different approach that emphasizes mutuality, learning, connection, and empathy. Trust-based philanthropy invites joyfulness, messiness, camaraderie instead of competition. Grantees can be more honest about their successes and challenges, not just about problem solving, but also about celebrating what it means to be together. What if we look for grantees not to get the answers right all the time, but instead to unlock our collective creativity? The problems we and our planet face are too big for us not to be working together in a generative way. We need to switch from being objective to being experienced. I apologize because I have something in my hand, but I will always put air quotes around objective. Objective takes an all things being equal worldview, even when things are not at all equal. It weighs everything in the present moment in time, a snapshot. Everyone believes they are the average on an issue, and extremes are defined by whatever is equidistantly to their left or to their right. Experience explores not just the left and the right axis, but also the past and the present axis and the future. Where have we been? Where do we want to go? centering the voice of people who have experienced the worst of this society, rejects black and white thinking by incorporating concepts such as familiarity, context, and our values. It is only in recent years that philanthropy has awakened to the wisdom of asking and engaging those most impacted by an issue what they believe should be the solutions. When we do that, brilliant ideas emerge, such as forming a coalition between working women and care workers to insist to lawmakers that care is infrastructure. As I think all of you know, we came very close to actually achieving this in legislation. Or supporting new generations to run for office who know the priorities of their generation because they, unlike most of us, have lived through active shooter drills as part of the school day. Or giving people who are poor cash instead of services that we've cooked up. Spending school funds on lunches rather than metal detectors. Opening and staffing pools, parks, and libraries rather than opening and staffing jails and detention centers. We need to shift from mechanistic to organic. Factories revolutionized production by making each task mechanical and replicable. Orderly assembly lines, codified processes that guaranteed production at scale. Too often, that is philanthropy's mental model for how change happens. Believing that a streamlined and efficient process will work to address complex and social problems in the same way that computers or cars are produced, but it doesn't. And of course, the strategic plan is the Foundation's favorite factory. We spend millions of dollars and man and woman hours each year producing them. But organic change is not fast and it is not a straight line. We need to shift our thinking about progress from mechanistic to organic. While George Floyd's murder was the spark that ignited the Black Lives Matter global movement, organizers had been working for years in communities to build relationships and listen to residents. They had built trust, made phone trees, attended congresses across municipalities and states and across the globe. They knew how to organize actions, and what they didn't know, they knew who to call to find out. They knew what to do when confronted by police in armored suits. They knew what to do when tear-gassed. They knew when that moment arose, those organizers were ready to mobilize. Could they have organized the largest peaceful protest in U.S. history on the streets for weeks if they had received a grant that required that outcome within 12 months? I don't think so. Funding community change is more like planting seeds in a garden than it is like designing an assembly line. The most productive and healthy gardens will have a diversity of types of plants. And even still some years, some plants won't thrive. But we don't give up gardening, and we try new varieties in different arrangements, and we still continue to provide water, sun, fertilizer. Effectiveness is not a factory of outputs, but a forest of roots and resiliency. Caring hands can weave multiple solutions into a community safety net with time and with loving care. We have to move from dominion to reciprocity. There is a worldview that humans have dominion over everything. The U.S. was in fact founded on the doctrine of discovery that gave European settlers the right to take land from the native inhabitants, and soon after to steal Africans and enslave them for the purpose of saving their souls. Racism, a caste system based on skin color, was then constructed to systematize that hierarchy. Until we confront that foundational ideology, we will remain mired in beliefs that richer people are better, smarter than others, and therefore get to make the world in their image. They get to control and decide. But true philanthropy is alchemy. It is a powerful elixir of reciprocity. During COVID, tens of thousands of mutual aid groups sprung up around the country, neighbors helping neighbors, checking in on each other, offering what they knew others needed, offering what they had. Some days we gave, other days we received. It felt good because it was of a whole cloth, not just two sides to a coin. Philanthropy is a two-way street. Donors give, but they also receive. It is only habits of oppression that encourage donors to see themselves as givers and others as takers. Receiving a gift does not make the recipient less than the gift giver. Giving isn't a conquest. It is a relationship of mutuality and equals. Finally, in the shifts, I would say we have to shift from hate to love. Increasingly, we live in a world hemmed in by fear, journalists being killed, election administrators being threatened, children being slaughtered in their schools, peaceful demonstrators being run over and shot. So, we have to turn from this kind of hate to love. We have to learn how to love from the people who love even when their houses have been burned down, even when their child has been killed. We have to run to love in communities that don't all agree with each other, but where being proximate, as the great Brian Stevenson says, is the point. Where we are soft with each other, not rigid. Where we are open to having our hearts broken. But love also requires that we tell the truth. Not soft sell our values, not dance around what is true just to create illusory bridges or have empty politeness. What are some of the truths that we must continue to assert? Climate change exists, and time is running out. Modest improvements may have been acceptable compromises 2 decades ago, but as the incredible organizer Grace Lee Boggs used to say, it is important to know what time it is on the clock of the world, and time is running out. Democracy is under attack, and we have approximately 1 more election to save it. Media is not objective. People listen to who they trust, so we must support the people they trust if we want to communicate with them. College is not the ticket to the middle class that we once promised it would be. And we must make that right or accept the consequences of a generation disillusioned. Voter fraud is not a thing. Voter suppression is, and it is spreading like wildfire. And voter suppression must be named for what it is. It is a racist attack to disenfranchise entire populations whose votes matter. There is enough money. 8 men own 50% of the world's wealth. We do not have poverty because there isn't enough money. This is a bad policy decision that we have made, and we can make good ones. There is enough money to assure that everyone has housing, food, health care, and an education. George Floyd should be alive. Black Lives Matter. Water is life. History matters. I come back to where I started, a little bit about me, a little bit about our history together, some hopes and dreams for our future. And I will share with you, this is, if you haven't been, the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, an extraordinary place that every one of us must go to. And I'll read to you a small plaque there. For the hanged and beaten, for the shot, drowned, and burned, for the tortured, tormented, and terrorized, for those abandoned by the rule of law. We will remember. With hope, because hopelessness is the enemy of justice. With courage, because peace requires bravery. With persistence, because justice is a constant struggle. With faith, because we shall overcome. Thank you.